Hello everyone, welcome to this month's GLOW webinar. For those who are first timers, GLOW stands for Genuine, Loving, Outstanding Women and is an initiative by the Heartfulness Institute to teach meditation to women around the world. Heartfulness meditation uses yogic transmission or pranahuti. This month, the topic of our webinar is in commemoration on the International Human Rights Day, which was on December 12th. The topic is On the Other Side of Childhood, a panel on rights of children in difficult circumstances. I'm Sara Babbar, your host for the evening. Today we have with us a panel with Dr. Preeti Desai and Ms. Nikita Patodia. To tell you a little about Dr. Preeti, Dr. Preeti Desai is India's first certified child life specialist and an associate professor at the East Carolina University in Greenville, North Carolina, where she teaches child life, child development, and courses in human development and family science. Prior to teaching, she has worked as a child life specialist at the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, Johns Hopkins Children's Center. In India, she has also worked with Chetna, a health education organization addressing the needs of children, women, and families in rural, tribal, urban slum areas. We welcome you, Dr. Preeti.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to my time with you and Nikita and everybody else in the audience.
Welcome. We also have with us Nikita Patodia. Nikita is a trained social worker and earned her second master's degree in gender development and globalization from London School of Economics and Political Science. She was the LSE India Fellow in 2013-14. She's worked in India over 9 years on programs at intersections of gender, sexuality, technology, disability, violence, and rights. She's passionate about feminist approaches to prevent and respond to violence against women, young persons, and creating more feminist spaces. We welcome you, Nikita.
Thank you, Sara. Hello, Dr. Preeti, and hello, everyone.
It's a pleasure to have both of you here.
Pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you.
On this occasion of International Human Rights Day, why is it necessary to talk about rights of children? Why is that such a necessary topic?
Thank you. That's a very good question. So on the occasion of Human Rights Day, it's important to remember that what are we marking on December 10th, International Day of Human Rights? We are actually marking the Declaration of Human Rights, the Universal Declaration that was first brought into account by the then League of Nations, now United Nations, in 1948, on December 10th, 1948. And it was the first time that the world got together, and this was in the context of the Second World War had just ended, and imperialism was on a decline, so we thought. But in that context, there were certain inalienable rights that every human being that was alive on the planet was given, or this declaration would uphold, because you can't give rights, you can only uphold rights, right? So from that time onwards, and then in 1989, when again the United Nations brought into force the Convention of the Rights of the Child, which is basically adapting human rights for children. So what do human rights look for children? And childhood, as we go on deeper into this conversation, we will look at how childhood is, and minors, because the age of consent or who is understood as a child differs across nations. Globally, it's understood as everyone who's under the age of 18, unless that country has a different law. So what are some of these special protections that minors or children need, and how is it that we can protect it and uphold it as nations, as communities? So it's extremely important to talk about rights of children when we are talking about human rights, because that is, I mean, if we look at developmental theories, of course, childhood is where the future adult is shaped, and there are so many lenses of looking at this. But it's extremely, extremely important to protect the rights of children so that in the later years of their life, talking of children specifically, their human rights are also upheld. Often rights are taken away, or children are not protected, and that just sets off this chain reaction or set of action where they continue to live a life that is not to an optimal level of their development. And of course, this is not on the children, but I'm saying that is the reason why it is important to understand what rights of children are when we're talking about human rights, how they could be different, how they are similar, how can we protect them. So yeah, it's extremely important to talk about child rights.
And if I could add, just looking at the 4 core principles from the UNCRC that Nikita just mentioned, the UNCRC, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is the single most comprehensive document of child rights that apply to children around the world, and that makes governments, non-profit organizations, and individuals in all settings responsible for caring for children in certain ways to uphold these rights. And so the 4 core ones that we all need to know and create awareness is the principle of non-discrimination. So all children, regardless of what their family background is, what language they speak, where they come from, how educated their parents are or not, how wealthy or not, there should be no discrimination for children. Anything we choose to do as governments, non-government organizations, as individuals, we need to look at the best interests of the child. So whatever decisions are being made, are those in the best interests of children? That's very important. And of course, children have the basic right of survival and development. So anything we decide, they first should survive, and then they should thrive and develop. And finally, this is what gets missed sometimes, is listening to the views of the child. So sometimes as adults, we kind of look at the child as, well, you don't know what you want or need, but we really need to, as activists and informed individuals, really take time to listen to the views of the child.
Thank you so much for sharing your inputs. It is really important because children understand, they have a sense of right and wrong. Only at that age, they probably cannot uphold that right and wrong. And that is why we as activists or informed adults need to take care of that. Moving on to the next question. We talked about non-discrimination. Who are these children we are discriminating against? Who are these children who are in difficult or different circumstances? It would be really nice to put into perspective to understand the rest of the webinar who they are. So can we hear from you?
Okay, so there are 2 essential perspectives we can take when we are talking about children who live in difficult circumstances. One is a legal perspective, and I can talk about India. This is where my work has been based. In India, legally, there is a Juvenile Justice Care and Protection Act, which talks about 2 types of children who need protection, right? And here, when I'm saying children, I mean all people under the age of 18. So there are children who are in need of care and protection. So these would include children who are on the streets, or children whose labor is exploited, or children who run away and are unaccompanied, or who are separated from their families, so on and so forth. And then there is children who are in conflict with law. So here again, I will not get too deep into the legal reasons why children become in conflict of law. But of course, if they're involved in any crime, or there are many other laws. There are loopholes which can lead up to children ending up into the legal system. So these are the two broad buckets from a legal point of view to understand who are children who live. And there is a term called children in exceptionally difficult circumstances. And this has a proper definition. We can look at it from the legal point of view. What I'm interested in doing is looking at it from a developmental point of view, from a developmental lens. So children who live in difficult circumstances, because we have a certain image of when we think about a child in a difficult circumstance, I want our audience to try and imagine who is it that we think of, what picture comes to our mind. And it would often be of like maybe a poorer person or a child who's on the street. But when we talk of it from a developmental point of view, there are many children who live in exceptionally difficult circumstances. And here I want to talk about abuse and violence. And because it is a right, like Dr. Preeti has also said, it is a right of children to be protected from any kind of abuse and violence. However, this is where most societies, India probably is at forefront of that, maybe because of the number of children we have in our country, in how much abuse and violence there is in lives of children, and two, how little understanding as a community we have about this, and how because of that collective force, we often fail to protect children and young people from abuse, harassment, exploitation. Up until 2007, there was not even any comprehensive data in India which could tell us, how many children experience what kinds of abuse. So all the data that we had, which also would inform policy and laws, was an aggregation of what we call the NCRB, the National Crime Register of India, which is basically a register of how many crimes are registered, how many FIRs are registered. Now, this was not an adequate data set because it's very biased. We know that less than 10% of crimes are actually reported, and this number is even less when it comes to cases or reports around violence and abuse. And the reason for this is most abuse is perpetrated by people who the child knows, who the child is close to. This could include family, this could include friends, neighbors. Back in 2007, the government of India released a very comprehensive study, a very advanced study for that time that not many countries in the world have, which was basically a study of child abuse in India. And the results that came out of that were very, very grim. It looked at, and I will not get into the methodology, but the methodology was a solid one, and it covered enough children in India to make these findings stand. And basically, children in India are experiencing a lot of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. So the grim statistics for sexual abuse, for instance, are 53%. In India, 53% children, including boys and girls, because the data includes both the genders, experience one or more form of sexual abuse. And I want that statistic to kind of sink in, because that means 1 in 2 kids, statistically speaking. And people who've been working on the ground also know that these are government statistics. So this is definitely a conservative statistic. So if I have to now go back and reflect on your question and say, who are the children who are living in difficult circumstances? In today's world, I would say 90% of children. Um, what is it that we can do is a conversation that this kind of data and statistics lead us up to, right? So maybe we can focus on that in the next question, and I can let Dr. Preeti respond to this as well, if there is anything that you want to add or from your point of view you want to share.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that information about the study from the government of India, and really the whole idea of children facing sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse really needs to be addressed. And you're so right that it's children in all sections of society. It's not just the children in impoverished settings, but in all homes. So I think that's a very important point. From my perspective, since my work has been with children in healthcare settings, the children that I'm going to speak about are children who have chronic illnesses, children who might have some developmental disabilities, and children who are whose parents have to take them to the hospitals frequently for different healthcare kinds of experiences. And to talk about just looking at, say, in India, we have approximately 472 million children. That's about 39% of the population of India. That is a lot of young people that we need to be mindful of their wellness from all perspectives. So just looking at these children with illnesses, who are these children who end up in hospitals? These are children who have cancer. From one of the organizations I have the privilege to volunteer with, Can Kids, Kids Can in New Delhi, they say that about 40 to 50,000 children every year are diagnosed with cancer. Again, not every child is diagnosed with cancer. So again, just like Nikita said, with sexual abuse, not every case of abuse is reported. Same thing with cancer. Not every child is even diagnosed, or if they are, it is really, really late, so that they don't even have access to treatment, because by the time the families bring them, it is too late. Cancer, heart defects, kidney disease, liver disease, seizure disorders, these are the kinds of things that children are living with. Again, there is no national survey in India, so we have to rely on perhaps individual hospital statistics, administrative data on this. So again, from my perspective, from my training and from my life work, I focus more on children with, these kinds of conditions. Children born with cleft lip and palates, facial deformities, facial difference. So these children all of these children end up with self-esteem issues, social integration issues. I'm not saying all of them. Obviously, there are families, no matter from what SES the parents come from, very caring, and they want to do the right thing. But do we have access to all the resources? I think there's inequity of access in psychosocial services for children. Yes, we may have healthcare, and yes, there's a wide difference in terms of private, public, hospital sectors, so there's a variety of differences. Our healthcare system is overworked in the public sector. So, it's just like, can we just take care of the physical needs of the child? It's the psychosocial, the emotional needs of the child and the family that get overlooked. And so hopefully we can talk a little bit more. So for me, when I speak, I'm speaking about these children with special healthcare needs, special developmental needs.
I just want to speak a little bit to what you said. Extremely important. Set. I don't want to say the word issues, but I hear what you're saying, and one thing that in the last 2 years of my work, some of the work has been focused at the intersections of disability and sexuality. And I just want to speak a little bit to that. That when we say children in difficult circumstances, and then when we understand it from like a practitioner like you and your point of view of how difficult it is for children in the healthcare settings. First of all, healthcare settings are not even, at least in developing countries, they're not, and there is a whole politics behind that as well. But they're not designed for children and centering children's experiences. Um, it is designed for adults, and so much of healthcare has been designed for looking after and caring for war veterans. And whatever infrastructure and tools we had from that is applied to, children in healthcare settings also. And I'm speaking from a developing country and the baseline point of view. I'm not speaking from like the highest research that exists. And the one thing that I want to point out is how when we talk about children in difficult circumstances, we are essentially talking about vulnerabilities, right? Children who are in difficult circumstances are much more vulnerable to things like exploitation, things like abuse, and in India as well. Like when and in the work at the intersection of disability and sexuality and working with bodies, we even as practitioners, we need much more intersecting, praxis of knowledge and practice, because there are often cracks that children unfortunately fall through. So, for instance, there is, some of our work in the past. I can share links for this, but some of the work in the past on sexuality and disability has focused on how children who live with disability are extra vulnerable or more vulnerable to sexual abuse. And there can be so many reasons, because as a child as a disabled child, you are, and depends on the disability and the extent of it and the nature of it, but you're more dependent on the care of another person, and that gives another person more opportunity to groom a child, to kind of manipulate them, because all abuse is essentially manipulating children, right? Like, because children do not have a wider and deeper understanding of the way the world works like adults have, or adults are expected to have. And so I wanted to point out that, definitely there are children who are in difficult circumstances, but children in difficult circumstances, when we need to look at them intersectionally, because there are a lot of cracks that get created, even in practice, in the way we have like learned to respond to them so far.
Thank you for sharing from your experiences. The statistics for abuse were alarming, and it's not a lesser known fact. But what we really want to know is that, hospitals is one of, we don't even consider it as, that there might be abuse there, or it might be a special situation. Like, a hospital is a very normal place to go. Children are in and out. We don't think of it from that point of view. So we want to know from Dr. Preeti what child life is, how it helps, because we're also looking at solutions from this webinar, and child life can be a good solution, a step forward in this direction. So can we please have your thoughts?
Yes, thank you so much. So again, just looking at the hospital as an environment, like physical space of the hospital, to think about it as normal, from my perspective, I look at homes, playgrounds, neighborhoods. Those are normal places for children. And then hospitals, those are places where you go when there is some pathology and you need some extra care, right? Again, with hospitals, there is, we just need to quickly understand that there is a variety. So there are primary care centers, there are, your pediatrician where they go for immunizations and just coughs and colds, right? So that's in and out. But when children have some of those more chronic illnesses, injuries, life-altering injuries, even sexual, physical abuse, and they end up in the hospital for extended periods of time. If you look at chronic illness, the definition looks at when the disease process lingers for 3 months or longer, and there is a potential for premature death of the child, then the whole experience changes. The children are in and out of hospitals. In our setup, often it's like more than one strike, that contextuality that Nikita mentioned. They are in the hospital, the schooling is gone. Our national education policy, which just came out, does acknowledge that when children are not well, they cannot learn. But then there is a full stop unless I didn't explore it further. So the focus is more on immunization and nutrition, but then not on the education of the child that is sick. So from the child life perspective, so let's understand, one, there's a developmental perspective. So if it is a baby, a toddler, a preschooler, a school age, a teenager, or a young adult in hospitals with chronic conditions, please know that all of their developmental needs are different, how they experience illness, how they experience pain, and pain is a big, big issue. How they experience separation, how they experience understanding of the disease, how they understand the impact of their disease immediately and in the long run in their life is all different. So because of the time, I cannot go into each developmental stage, but please know that we acknowledge that the developmental experience of illness will be different, and it's bidirectional. So it's how the age of the child will impact on how they experience the hospitalization, and the disease will impact the development of the child. So please understand the bidirectionality of it. Therein comes child life. So, or psychosocial services, if we don't necessarily have to label something as it has to be done by a child life specialist, but something that a person with developmental understanding, child-centered rights understanding will understand. So let's look at it. We want to look at the patient, if you will, as a child first, and then a patient. So once you have that shift, that this is a child with cancer, child with diabetes, child with a heart defect who's going to need multiple open heart surgeries to survive, then our perspective changes in how we approach this young person in the hospital. Understanding based on their developmental needs. School-age children want to be around other children. They don't want to be different. So that being embraced by peers is important. If you have a facial difference, if you have a nasal voice like this, if you have cleft lip and palate, you're going to talk like this. So imagine the ostracism that they might face, along with so many other factors that make them more vulnerable. Do you see what I'm saying? So in the interest of time, I'll talk about child life or psychosocial services from looking at 4 Ps, 4 letter Ps. Play, psychological preparation in terms of helping them understand their diagnosis and medical procedures, parent and family empowerment, and pain management from non-pharmacological perspectives in working along with the doctors to provide the pharmacological pain management. So 4 Ps. So child life people in hospitals, in healthcare, we can create friendly play spaces, keeping in mind, 1, infection control, 2, safety of the materials used in hospital spaces. Psychological preparation. I think one of the biggest fears for children is not understanding what is going on. So children have amazing imagination. So they can think up of all kinds of things that could be happening to them. Whereas when we provide them correct information in a developmentally appropriate way, then they will be better able to cope and handle their anxieties and their healthcare experience. So psychological preparation, patient education, in an age-appropriate manner. And you see my 2 friends here. This is Taklu and Takli from Can Kids. So for example, if you talk about children with cancer and hair loss, You can use dolls to create them. These were created here in India, right? So we can, one of the things when children, one of the most common things children have in hospitals is an IV, an intravenous cannula to get fluids, medicine. And often children think the needle still stays in there and they keep their hands really stiff. So we can actually play with them in a safe way to help them understand, there's only a small plastic tube that's going to stay in here. The needle goes away and you can see them breathe easily. So this is just a basic, simple procedure. So as child life specialists, we understand medical terminology, healthcare, whether it's getting tonsils removed or having open heart surgeries or organ transplants, you name it. We work alongside as a team with the doctors, nurses, therapists to help enhance the child's coping and the parents' coping. So a lot of that information happens. Parent empowerment. Parents often in our country, often I've seen parents use a visit to the doctor as a disciplinary threat. Do this or the doctor will give you an injection for no reason at all. So it creates a sense of, a fear. It's a consequence. So again, parent empowerment. Parents often believe that children should not be told what is going on with them. This is wrong. We need to empower and educate our parents. Again, all children will cope differently. So how much information we give will depend on the child's temperament and coping style. And that's the expertise that we bring. And pain is the final P. I'm speaking a little fast because of time constraints, but pain has to be managed. Children fear pain. Pain is debilitating to development, and that needs to be addressed. Sometimes we think, be brave, be bold, you're a boy, you shouldn't be discussing, your pain concerns. Don't cry, that's not cool. All that we need to help dispel and help work through pain management. So pain can be managed through medicines, and that's a good thing, but pain also can be managed through a lot of other cognitive affective strategies. And I think, Sarah, the mindfulness, the breathing, the body relaxation techniques, all of those are very, very useful. Those can be used with children as well. And quickly, child life, it does exist in most children's hospitals in many countries around the world, typically in developed countries, if you will. And it is emerging in countries like ours, but we have a very, 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 very long way to go. We probably have at least 100 years of catching up to do.
Thank you so much. I find Taklu and Takli very interesting to explain concepts to children. Yes, it is developmentally appropriate. Children would rather understand with these props rather than, an adult just telling them what is wrong and what is going to happen with them. It's way more interesting. And yes, parents do hide a lot of things that are going on with children, and it leads to a lot of frustration on their part. And so, yes, child life is very important and we need this awareness. Thank you for that. And shifting gears a little bit, but still on solution mode, we would like to know from Nikita what are the long-term abuses of what are the long-term effects of child abuse, and what is the government doing for it? What are the possible solutions for it is what we would like to know.
So thank you for that important question. Where does one even begin? I want to piggyback a little bit on what Dr. Preeti said, and it is so important, the work that you're doing and the way you're talking about it, because what I hear is that you're putting the child and their experience in the center of the whole healthcare system, and then and that's your starting point. You're taking that to then understand, okay, what are the child's needs to get through this system, and whatever reason the child is in that system for. And widely speaking, yes, that is also one of the shifts that a lot of people, again, India has a very striving disability movement as well. And this is something that they've also really emphasized, that we need to move from a biomedical approach to a socio-cultural and preventative and public health approach to bodies, right? And then health is a segue of that. And when we fail to do that, and when we fail as adults, as communities, as families, as schools, as societies, to uphold the experiences of children, when we fail to believe in children when they tell us something, we often say like, oh, children have a voice. Like we say, oh, women have a voice. But we need to understand, do we listen to that voice?
Mm-hmm.
As adults, we always have more power in any culture. I don't think there is any country in the world where children have equal power. They may have equal rights, but they do not have equal power. So as adults, as parents, as caregivers, as practitioners, we need to understand that whenever we are, even right now, when we are talking about children as adults on this panel, there is a certain power dynamic. So unless we understand that power and engage with it, which is a very difficult thing to engage with, but it is important. Until we do that, we are not going to have collective breakthroughs. And speaking directly to long-term impacts, I mean, any kind of abuse in childhood, even as adults, but because children essentially are operating from a place of trust. They do not understand the world the same way as adults do. Hence, they have caregivers who are adults or older people who are their gateway to the world. And often when abuse comes from these people who are expected to uphold the best interest of the child, the impact is deep and long term. So, we can understand, I would like to use the terminologies of trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder, which is, without trying to label every experience as a traumatic experience. What I want to focus on is that often there is abuse. I mean, we've seen the statistics. There is abuse in our homes, in our communities, in our neighborhoods, but we never talk about it. So there is this absence of language and absence of space, and absence of any kind of space, and then very, very big absence of safe spaces. So what happens is there is a intersection of some of these things, them being what is the nature of abuse that a child has experienced, how grave the experience itself has been, whether it has been a single event or a long series of recurring events, who was the perpetrator and what was the child's relationship like with that person, all of these things, and whether the child was able to get themselves out of that situation or not, right? So here there is like the innate reaction, the survival response to every dangerous situation is either fight, flight, or freeze. So depending on all of these things, all of these factors, the impact is derived. So I have a very good book that I would like to read a paragraph from this book. It's called "The Body Keeps the Score," and the author is Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. Dr. Preeti, you probably know about his work. This speaks to the impact of abuse and trauma, and it goes. Trauma affects not only those who are directly exposed to it, but also those around them. Soldiers returning home from combat may frighten their families with their rages and emotional absence. The wives of men who suffer from PTSD tend to become depressed, and the children of depressed mothers are at risk of growing up insecure and anxious. Having been exposed to family violence as a child often makes it difficult to establish stable, trusting relationships as an adult. Trauma, by definition, is unbearable and intolerable. Most rape victims, combat soldiers, and children who have been molested become so upset when they think about what they have experienced, that they try to push it out of their minds, trying to act as if nothing happened and move on. It takes tremendous energy to keep functioning while carrying the memory of terror and the shame of utter weakness and vulnerability. While we want to move beyond trauma, the part of our brain that is devoted to ensuring our survival, which is deep below our rational brain, is not very good at denial. Long after a traumatic event is over, it may be reactivated at the slightest hint of danger and mobilize disturbed brain circuits and secrete massive amounts of stress hormones. This precipitates unpleasant emotions, intense physical sensations, and impulsive and aggressive actions. These post traumatic reactions feel incomprehensible and overwhelming. Feeling out of control, survivors of trauma often begin to fear that they are damaged to the core and beyond redemption. So, this really speaks to, I think, everything that even Dr. Preeti, you have been highlighting, that
Yes.
that experiences of abuse or denial of rights or a failure of upholding children's rights, especially the right that they have to be protected from all kinds of abuse and violence, when that is denied, and that is denied in a context, in a social, economic, cultural context where uh, which is not designed for the best development of children. In that context, trauma can be long. It can be um, repetitive. There can be patterns that are formed. And one thing, and the reason I wanted to read this out is also because when we say trauma or when we say PTSD, on one hand, again, it's a clinical term. People are diagnosed with PTSD, but it's also a developmental term. And it can be a lens to understand that trauma is also intergenerational. And this is what, it carries from adults, it goes on to children. Children imbibe it, they absorb it. So how is it that we can break this cycle? I think we need a separate webinar for that. But it's very, very important to understand that nothing is forgotten. Anything that a child experiences that is extremely stress orienting, that is extremely dangerous, and we're talking about abuse here, it is pushed back into the brain, and this is where children are resilient. This is why they need rights, because they are vulnerable to exploitation, to abuse. And as adults, we have the privilege to understand this and uphold it. And it also gives us an opportunity to engage with our own childhood and come to terms with our own experiences. So, this is where I want to stop for a moment, because when we say long-term impact, it is really very dynamic, and it depends on the child's experience and the help that they were able to get or not able to get.
Yeah. And if I could add to what you brought up, Nikita, it's just so important, the neuroscience behind how children react. So it's not just or they're getting they're abused, and they're responding a certain way, or they have this had a motor vehicle accident, they had to have their leg amputated, they're in treatment, a parent died during the incident, or they have cancer, or they have a heart disease, or whatever the different things are. We do talk about trauma informed care and the neuroscience behind when a child feels threatened, their system is ready to either freeze or flee, or just give up, and so that information can be coded in their nervous system, and then it creates a long-term effect. So, but I would like to shift a little to talk about hope, to talk about resilience. Nikita mentioned the word resilience. It is so important. Children inherently are resilient, and it is our job as caring individuals in their lives. We are professionals. The first thing we can do is recognize the strength within the child, recognize the strength within the family system. If it's the parents, it's the grandparents, aunties, uncles, neighbors, whoever they are, recognizing the strengths, not just focusing on, what is not going well. Let's focus on what is going well. What do they have going right for them? Myself and other child life specialists, we always look at what do they have that we can build on. So not just focus on the negativity, but on the positive aspects of the people around them who care. Maybe the way they respond to a child may be a little different. So doing a little role modeling, for example, in hospitals, around speaking, saying the same thing in a child-friendly way, or just creating a little change in the environment to provide that opportunity for play, or saying it's okay to cry, or encouraging the mother or father to get involved in the caregiving. So like looking at hope, being mindful in how we encourage the care of the child in whatever the setting is, whether it's in the advocacy, child abuse situation, or in healthcare, or in the school system, or wherever it is. But looking at that mindfulness and hope. But that trauma-informed care is very important. And I think one of the barriers, Sarah, I find that people think, oh, you're child development people, you're just touchy-feely, and this is not a priority in emerging economy countries. We need to focus on this, that, or the other. But it's really, really, really important to help them see the science behind behavior, the science behind coping, the long-term impact. The child who is abused, if they haven't received appropriate intervention early on, if they haven't been told that it was never their fault, they should never feel guilty. If the perpetrator abused them, manipulated them, it is never, never, ever the child's fault, because that guilt can carry on long term. The child with cancer, the child with other debilitating illness, they need to know that it is never their fault, that we have to empower them, we have to help them have hope, so that they can look toward building relationships with peers their age as they grow and mature, look towards a healthy romantic relationship, a healthy career, a healthy giving back, being able to empower others from their experiences, and not just being the victim, not just being the helpless person. So we need to be able to advocate for that and empower them for that strength. And so using the neuroscience behind behavior, I think the trauma-informed care language is so important. It's emerging. We need to really get it in our vocabulary, in our day-to-day language as human development, child development professionals, and just be out there and engage with interdisciplinary teams. We cannot work in a bubble. We need the government, we need the laws, we need the policies, we need all the stakeholders in all the various systems, whether it's doctors, whether it's lawyers, whether it's child advocates, and be a team. And I think that would really help the cause of children and families.
Thank you so much. I really got onto this one statement Nikita said, that we as adults are gateway to children, to the world, to the children, and we have to be that door that opens them into the world, not that shuts them and puts them back into a cocoon. And we have a tremendous job here, and the avenues are open for everyone to help. We have multiple stakeholders. We need to create this hope that Dr. Preeti said. On this note, uh, human rights rest on peace. Only if there is peace in the world, only if there's stability, can we finally meet all human rights. And for that, one of the very efficient practices is meditation. There is no place where meditation does not have a benefit. It can be for people in therapy, it can be for people who are thinking of solutions, because it will give them that inner strength to, be in the situation, not be washed out with it, and yet contribute meaningfully. So, for everyone, this meditative practice and Heartfulness has its offerings here. And we would be proceeding on to that with guided relaxation and meditating. I'll be guiding you through it, so we can sit for that. There is no strict posture. You can sit comfortably and close your eyes.
Sorry, is this going to be recorded as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Sit comfortably and close your eyes. Bring your attention to your toes. Relax your toes. Feel the energy of Mother Earth entering through your feet, moving up, relaxing your heels, your ankles, the calf muscles, and your knees. Your thighs are completely relaxed. Your entire leg is detensioned and relaxed. Move your attention to your hips. Relax your hips. Feel the energy move into your stomach. Relax the muscles of your stomach. Relax your waist. Feel the energy moving up into your chest, relaxing it completely. Take a deep breath and let it go. Bring your attention to your lower back. Feel the energy, relax your lower back and move into your upper back, gently relaxing it. Feel the energy move into your shoulders. Feel that your shoulders are completely dissolving, completely relaxed. Bring your attention to your arms. Your upper arms are relaxed. Your elbows, your forearms, your palms and your fingers, right up to your fingertips. Your hand is completely relaxed. Bring your attention to your neck. Release any strain in your neck. Your head is placed very gently on your neck. Feel the energy move up into your face, relaxing your lips, your jaws, your cheeks, your nose. Your eyes are gently closed, completely relaxed. Relax your forehead and your mind. Your entire body from top to bottom is completely relaxed. Bring your attention into your heart. Relax the muscles of your heart. Feel the love, the light of your heart. And feel this love and light spreading to your entire body. Resting your attention on the heart, give a thought that the source of divine light is present in my heart and is attracting me or pulling me towards it. If the attention seems to waver, it is okay. Just bring the attention gently back to the heart and remind yourself of the light within, and you are meditating on it. Whenever you're ready, you may gently open your eyes. Thank you so much for joining us and providing such an enriching conversation. It was really wonderful. And this brings us to the fact that, two things, however different they may be, they have confluence at some point, and we all are working for the same cause. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you, Dr. Preeti. It was really, really lovely to hear you and know more about your work.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Glow. And Nikita, I enjoyed being on the panel with you and learn and share our passions for children, for children's rights. So thank you so much for everything you've done. Thanks.
Thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar, and we hope to see you next time.